These are 3 of the most terrifying drug experiences ever shared online, and each one somehow gets worse. If you're into dark, real stories, drop a like, subscribe, and let's dive in. Satan Salad. Before I begin, I just want to explain to the reader that the "don't try this at home" caveat is not simply an obligatory disclaimer. What I did was a very bad idea, and though I had a sitter, and though I had taken all precautions necessary, it was stupid regardless. Just because you can survive a punch in the face doesn't mean it's fun. I started last week on Saturday. I had found the leaves in the woods behind my grandma's house when I was looking for shrooms. I have found fly agaric there before. My grandma confronted me when she saw me carrying them back to the car because she knew exactly what they were. I came up with a really shizzy excuse that I was going to feed them to my neighbor's rabbit, which only made things worse because she knew what it would do. I threw them over the fence, then went back to get them before I left. I hadn't eaten that day, which I thought was a good idea, and I decided to dry the leaves with a hairdryer, which was a dumb idea. They just blew onto the floor. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'm not the brightest bulb in the shed. So I put them in the oven for a little while with the door open. I called my friend Deuce over. I will call him D from now on. When I told him what was going on, he said he wasn't going to do it because he was the one who had to take care of me during a really bad salvia experience. Regardless, he did it. Probably because he knew I was going to do it whether I had a sitter or not, and I need supervision at all times, sober or not. I ground them up with a coffee grinder, which I then threw away because my mom uses that grinder, and I didn't want her to trip out. She's uptight. Oh man, the stuff tastes like ass washed in ass. I was making gagging faces and the whole time D was rolling his eyes. I got it down in about 10 minutes, so we went into the living room to watch Gummo, our favorite flick. He started smoking a cigarette and I put in a wad of chaw to bide our time. About an hour into the movie, I started having trouble following what was going on. Gummo is a tough movie to follow anyway, but I started forgetting that I was watching a movie. It was like I was constantly waking up and trying to figure out what happened while I was asleep, only to wake up again. D said I started clearing my throat a lot for some reason. I kept asking him if he'd change the channel, and then he'd tell me we were watching a movie, only to hear me ask the question again. This was the point where everything became darker. There was a low hum behind me, and every time I'd turn around to see what it was, it would stop. D started laughing, and he told me that I was tripping, but I had trouble accepting this. I didn't really remember taking anything, and I felt like my mind was still working okay. It was just that everything around me was getting twisted. At this point, I lost track of time. I asked D what I should do because I was still tripping, because I thought I had to go to work in a few minutes. He reassured me that it was still Saturday, then he asked me how long the trip lasts. I told him the internet said 3 days, and then I realized how funked I was. I had work on Monday. He told me to call in sick, but at this point I forgot what he was talking about. He said I got up and walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and started throwing the towels into the shower. I remember seeing myself going into the kitchen and sending a telegraph, but then as the telegraph started making grinding noises, it suddenly disappeared. D, being the film freak he is, ran into my room to get the camera. Unfortunately, for the next couple of hours, I didn't really do anything exciting. Instead, I curled into a ball and rocked back and forth like a mental patient. I did have a classic quote though. Under tapestry ho wai, followed by a bunch of Mandarin, I'm bilingual. I remember right about here hearing this tup 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 noise from my chest. As I started concentrating on it, an image of yellow worms eating at my heart flashed across my face, and suddenly my chest hurt. A lot. I sort of woke up to D calming me. I had started crying and telling me that I was fine. I reached into my pocket to get some chaw, then I was back in crazy world. I didn't know at the time, but D had taken my chaw away from me because I kept taking out some tobacco and then putting it back in my pocket. It was funny at the time, but he got worried I might start eating it. I was suddenly on my aunt's tree swing, telling this girl, A, my first girlfriend, that I didn't want to sing at her funeral. She begged me, saying that I had played the guitar beautifully, and besides, Jan hates me. Unless you're me, this doesn't make sense. But I think this was a very important vision for me. It made a lot of sense. I started crying at this time, but it felt like my tears were burning my face. D said he started wondering if he should call a doctor, because I was really flushed. It was also at this point he called into work sick for me, the first day I've missed in 2 years. I remember asking for A to come back, then I started wandering down a hallway. Mind you, I was sitting next to my futon for most of this, approximately 6 to 7 hours, doing nothing but coughing, clearing my throat, and talking nonsense, looking for a doctor. This is where things get weird. I have a pet Burmese python named Mildred, and she started banging her head against the top of her cage like she was trying to get out. This is really weird for her because she's very docile. You could poke her in the eye and she wouldn't even hiss at you. I somewhat remember this, or maybe I think I do because it's on video. D started to get really tired, but he wasn't going to doze off because I guess I was still acting freaked out. I think this may have been the point where I thought I was in a wheelbarrow full of rats, thinking it was my throne. Looking back, I realize this may have been a reference to my favorite song, Climbing Up the Walls by Radiohead. Who knows? The one thing I remember from this part of the trip was that I thought I was in a dream, but even when I took control of it, I'm a lucid dreamer too. It would only get weirder and worse. One part of the dream was talking to my old baseball coach, who died in a snowmobile accident when I was 13, asking him how I get out of here. He started walking toward me, and suddenly I got scared. Even though I was saying, "This is just a dream," I couldn't get him to stop coming at me, and I couldn't move my legs. I started to scream, and then he looked like he was walking away. D said I never actually screamed during the first night. The second day wasn't any better. I was really thirsty, but when D would get me water, I would drink a little and get sick. He was also trying to get food in me, but I couldn't swallow. Just having food in my mouth made me feel dirty. I didn't feel nauseous, I just felt weird eating. When I did swallow, it felt like it was hurting my stomach. It was also at this point I felt like I couldn't breathe. This may have been true because D said I was sweating really badly, and he said my pupils were really huge. A digital picture confirms this. I just remember praying to a God I didn't believe in that it would end. I said I would quit drinking, tobacco, and pot, some promise. I'm stoned now. I wanted out of this trip. I'd had bad trips before, but this one kept coming back in waves, worse than ever. The hallucinations started to get stronger too. I could now smell things that weren't there, and I could feel them too. I remember seeing a hound, not a dog, some sort of freaky hound, coming out from under my desk and brushing up against my leg. I could feel it, and then suddenly it wasn't there. This was also when something started tugging at me. It felt like some force was pulling me backward, and if I turned around, it would still pull me from behind. Mind you, I wasn't really moving all that much, but I thought I was. D wasn't feeling too great, because he stayed up drinking coffee to watch over me. Gratitude doesn't begin to describe what I owe him, and he tried to get me to go for a walk with him. Every time he tried to pull me to my feet, he said I would stumble and fall to the floor. I would just sit down really hard. I also started pushing on the floor, and he said my jaw was locked really tight. This is the part of the trip where my memory sort of fails me. I remember bits and pieces like hearing sirens and pounding on the walls, and I remember watching my computer monitor fall over and burst into blue flames. I started to get hungry, but every time D brought me something, it made me sick just to look at it. I found a silver dollar on my desk, and for some reason, it made me laugh. I started playing with it, and then all of a sudden it got heavy, so I tried to throw it back on my desk. It ended up landing like 3 feet away from me. My body wasn't listening to me very well. This is, embarrassingly, where I pissed myself too. D said he was worried, not because he had to clean up a mess, but because I hadn't really drunk much at all, and I was pissing like a racehorse. I do remember him coming back to me with a bunch of paper towels, new shorts, and a big glass of water, but I also remember getting very scared. I asked him if he was writing this down, and he looked at me really confused, which scared me more. This is when I tried to climb onto my bed to get away from him. He was worried that I would get piss on my bed, so he grabbed me. Big mistake. I started freaking out, swinging my arms furiously. I remember doing this, and though it seems crazy now, at the time I thought I was truly in danger. I also remember that I thought it was still daytime, even though it was about 2 a.m. Monday morning. Around here, D had called his girlfriend to keep an eye on me, and he went to sleep on the couch. I remember waking up to find her cradling me, telling me that, "They're gone, don't worry, you're fine." I don't know what she was talking about. I can only assume I was talking gibberish again. I didn't really feel comfortable with her holding me like that, even though she's a good friend, maybe because I don't remember her coming in, so I started pushing her away. She laughed. I knew I was coming back, not coming down, but coming back. at this point because I started to feel really tired and hungry. The hallucinations were minor at this point. I may have simply been dozing off. I can't be sure. Tuesday was a disaster. I couldn't stay focused on anything at work, and I kept worrying that people would think I was stoned or hungover because I was stuttering my speech a little, and everyone was asking if I was feeling okay. Luckily, they thought I was still sick. I got absolutely nothing done. When I got home that night, I ate a huge dinner and passed out immediately. Wednesday was a little better. My brain seemed to be working okay, but it was at this point that I started to remember everything I saw when I was tripping, so I was still sort of distracted. It's now a week and a day later, and I still don't feel totally right. I don't think I'm ever going to do this again, and I wouldn't recommend it. I did gain a bit of insight from the experience, but I would have rather just taken shrooms or acid or something a little more manageable. It really sucked being stuck in a bad trip for 3 days. Definitely a thumbs down. Strongest thing I've ever taken. I have done my fair share of psychedelics in my day, but nothing I have ever tried or imagined could possibly compare to the visions of Datura. After reading the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, I knew I had to try it. The lawyer in the book told of an experience with the infamous Jimson weed, and at that point I thought I could add a tally to my list of psychedelic substances I have experienced. Let me just say now that Datura is by far the most intense thing I have ever had. I live in a pretty nice neighborhood. There is a forest behind my house, so when I heard that it grows wild in the US, I decided to go out hunting. It wasn't long before I was pleasantly surprised to find a nice group of the weeds. I had been through these woods a lot, mostly smoking pot with my friends, and was astounded to realize I had walked by these plants so many times without ever knowing their worth. Anyway, I took 3 of the seed pods, the strongest part, or so I'm told, back to my house. Later that night, I told my friend to come over and that I had a surprise for him. When he got there, he was astounded at my bounty. He, like me, had also heard of Datura's supernatural powers. We decided to do it the following night over at his apartment. I still live with my parents. Bummer. So, about 6 o'clock that night, we decided we were tired of waiting and to get this party started. We cracked open the pods and scooped out the seeds. I was disappointed that there weren't any black, mature seeds, and for a moment I wondered if this was the right plant I had gotten. But I got over that quickly, telling myself that if it wasn't the right plant, it wouldn't do anything at all. So we took about 2 pods worth of seeds and pulverized them in a mortar and pestle until we ended up with a bowl of the stuff. We each decided to take a teaspoonful. We downed the quite nasty tasting semi-powder with a half glass of water. 5 minutes later, we decided to take another teaspoon each, fearing it wouldn't be enough. About 25 minutes later, I started to feel strange. Not like I was building to a peak, but a genuinely strange and inexplicable feeling. I remember lying down and feeling kind of tired, then getting up to go outside. I needed to get to the plants. I wanted to look at them very badly. My friend stopped me from leaving, I think, because I ended up sitting down on the floor. I remember thinking about a sandwich I had eaten the day before that I had left in my friend's fridge. But then I remembered I had not eaten a sandwich at all, and if I had eaten it, it sure as hell wouldn't be in my friend's fridge. I remember things were strange, but they didn't feel strange. I looked up, and the sky was as blue as could be, but then dark clouds filled the sky and lightning started flashing. A woman's face appeared to me, and I knew it was her. The plants were an extension of her life force. She was calling for me. I tried to run, but then I was back in my friend's apartment, sitting on the floor. I tried to get up. I needed to see the plants. I needed to do something, or else she would have my soul. I remember walking toward the door, but not making it there. I would always forget what I was doing, and then when I got there, there was no door at all. I felt trapped. I needed to get out. I looked over, and my friend was lying down on the couch with his eyes closed. I remember wondering if he was dead, and then I started to see his hair and fingernails grow really long. He appeared very old to me, and then I saw what was happening. She was taking him. I saw his eyes flash open just then, and everything was normal again. I remember asking myself where my cigarettes were. Just then there was a knock at the door. It was my girlfriend, wondering where I was. She had brought 3 friends with her, all people I had gone to school with in earlier years, who had moved away. This did not seem odd to me at the time. I invited them in, and we started talking about something. I can't remember exactly what. I reached into my pocket for a lighter to light a cigarette my girl had given me, but when I looked up, they were gone. I mean, vanished. The odd thing was, I still had the cigarette. I shrugged this off and tried to light the cigarette, but every time I tried, the lighter wasn't working right, or I'd forget what I was doing. I reached over to pet my dog, which is strange considering my dog died when I was 12. I don't remember much after this, except lying down on the floor and wondering if I would wake up with my soul still mine. I woke up still feeling weird, but it was manageable. Things were still where I put them 10 minutes later, but my eyes were funked up for about a week after. I talked with my friend, who told me that he had never been asleep at all. Pretty weird. All in all, an amazing substance, but not for beginners, or even some of the more experienced. Only for those who want to be able to say they've seen everything. A brush with death and total confusion. My memories of this event are patchy at best, but through talking to the people involved, I've patched them together in a logical order. I came very close to death, and I do not recommend Datura as a recreational drug, though having survived the experience it was terrifying, incredible, and life-changing. I still have trouble dealing with the emotions I experience when I look back on it. This document is perhaps a therapeutic tool I am using to deal with it once and for all. All names have been changed. Philadelphia, Thanksgiving break, junior year of high school. My best friend, and as of 2008 my wife, Amanda, slept over at my house. We were big potheads at the time, but had never experimented with anything else. We woke up early to go to our friend Jeremiah's house because he grew weed, and we wanted to celebrate the break by smoking all day. I drank a beer I stole from my dad on the way there. When we got there, a strange smell filled the house. His parents were away, and he had a pot of a strange amber liquid on the stove. Jeremiah was an interesting kid. He appeared to be a run-of-the-mill street thug, but he was very interested in botany. He would see plants in people's yards and know their Latin names and all sorts of facts about them. When we got there, we asked him what the stuff was. He called it Datura loco. I had never heard of it. He said he got the seeds on the internet, planted them, and made a tea from the seeds. He told me it had similar effects to weed, which was quite false. We smoked a blunt, but I was still intrigued. We hung out for a while and decided to go to Amanda's house and watch a movie. Before we left, I asked Jeremiah for some of the Datura tea. He put about 4 shot glasses worth in an empty water bottle, and we left. On the way to Amanda's house, I drank it all. The dose was meant for both of us, but Amanda didn't want any, so I drank it all. It was the worst tasting thing ever, but I forced myself to drink it. We arrived at her house and sat down to watch a movie. She put on Herbie Fully Loaded. Luckily, I don't remember any of it. At some point during the movie, I felt extremely thirsty. Since it was autumn, I poured myself a glass of apple cider. It was difficult to drink. Every time I took a sip, I felt like my throat was closing up. I tried to drink it, but my thirst would not be quenched. We sat a little longer, and then I began feeling very uncomfortable. I had to pee. I got up and went to the bathroom, but nothing would come out. I stayed there for about 10 minutes but couldn't pee. I decided to ignore it and went back to the couch. After the movie, our friend Samantha came to take us to our friend Rob's house to smoke more. By the time she arrived, I was speaking mostly nonsense. I felt like I was talking normally, but neither of them could understand me, so it was kind of frustrating. We got in Sam's car. During the ride, I thought I was smoking a cigarette, but I kept dropping it and then wouldn't be able to find it. This would continue for the next 3 days. We got to Rob's house, and they all smoked another blunt. They didn't give me any, but I didn't notice. I was still smoking my imaginary cigarettes and speaking gibberish. I went into Rob's bathroom and tried to pee again. In my mind, I still couldn't pee. From what I found out later, I actually peed all over the floor and the walls. I also took all of his family's toothbrushes and put them in my pocket. I do not know why. They all went outside to smoke another blunt, and I did too. While they were smoking, I wandered away, and they found me about an hour later in a neighbor's yard, talking to a pine tree. I do not remember why. This is where my memory gets better. We left Rob's house and went to a party at my friend John's house. Again, I smoked imaginary cigarettes the whole way there. I had no idea who I was, where I was, or who I was with, and I had given up communicating because no one could understand me. When we got there, a lot of my friends were there, along with John's mom, whom I had known since kindergarten. It was his birthday, and there were balloons. The balloons moved around and seemed to follow me. Their shapes shifted between squares, circles, and triangles. I continued to smoke imaginary cigarettes. At first, no one noticed my state because I was keeping quiet. I was standing in the corner because I was afraid of the balloons. John's mom saw me and came over to talk. She asked me about college, and I replied, To me, I gave her a logical answer, but to her, I was still speaking gibberish. She knew I was on something and took me to my parents, who then took me to the hospital. This is where it gets messy. On the walk back to my parents' house, each piece of sidewalk I stepped on seemed to shatter away. I was terrified because I didn't want to fall through, but jolts of electricity ran through me when I tried to run. My parents were panicked and rushed me to the hospital because they didn't even know I smoked weed at the time. When I got to the hospital, they took me in right away. To me, the doctors and nurses looked like monsters, and I kept trying to get out of my chair and run. They had to physically restrain me. I didn't even recognize my parents at this point. When they got a bed for me, they held me down and took my clothes off. I fought them as best I could, but any fast movement would send a shock of electricity through my body. I punched and kicked the nurses a few times, but was unsuccessful in my attempt to escape. Eventually, they calmed me down. One of the doctors told me he was a wizard and had a magic potion to cure me. He handed me a cup of black liquid and told me to drink it. It was charcoal to pump my stomach, which was futile because it had been hours since I took it. I gulped the drink and vomited everywhere. Fast forward a bit, no memory. Apparently, at this point my kidneys were shutting down, so they had to put a tube in my penis so that I could pee. That was not fun at all. I remember screaming a lot and trying to fight, but I was tied down. Fast forward a little more. I was now in a different room. Chewbacca was next to my bed. I was still tied to the bed, and all sorts of IVs were in me. I kept trying to rip them out, so they had to put a lot of tape on them. Again, the imaginary cigarette came back. I smoked it for a while, then dropped it in my sheets. I tried to look for it, but instead, I found the stick shift from my car. I looked up, and suddenly I was driving down the street. I drove for a while, and then went to hit the brakes, but they were gone. I kicked my feet, but the sheets were covering them. Then I was back in the hospital room. I looked at the small fan in the room, and a strange miniature girl was crouched behind it, staring at me. I was scared of her and told Chewbacca to take the fan out, and he did. I found out later Chewbacca was my dad. Next thing I knew, I was in Amanda's dorm room smoking a bowl like I had been a few weeks earlier. All of the same people were there, and that day replayed itself almost entirely. Then I was back in the hospital bed. This vision of the dorm room and the vision of driving my car kept happening over and over, interspersed with being in the hospital bed next to Chewbacca. The whole time, I kept dropping the imaginary cigarette I was smoking. 3 days later, I woke up in the hospital bed, feeling like I had been hit by a train. I still had the catheter and was hooked up to IVs. I had only a few memories of the past 4 days, but they made no sense to me. As I write this, I realize again how patchy the memory is. My parents were there and explained to me what happened. They called Amanda to find out what I took. They told me my kidneys had stopped working for almost 2 days and had only just started working again, and my heart rate jumped from dangerously low to dangerously high over and over. The doctors gave me a 50% chance of survival. I spent the next day in the ICU before they released me. I was extremely weak for the next 5 or 6 days, and they made me go to a drug counselor. Over the next 3 years, I did many drugs heavily and developed some serious problems. Anytime I did acid or shrooms, I would see that small girl behind the fan, and it creeped the hell out of me. 8 months ago, I went to jail and then to rehab, and I have not used drugs since then. Datura was the first step in a long road of drug abuse, and looking back, I wish it had scared me straight. I still wish I remembered more of what happened, but maybe it's best I don't. If you made it this far, you already know those stories were insane. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment which story stuck with you the most. And check out the videos on screen for more.